welcome everybody. So today we'll have the opportunity to talk about Constellation Network, a layer 0 protocol network I've grown to become very fond of. We're lucky enough to have some of the smartest guys in the space to come discuss the topic with us today. So we have a ton to cover. So I think we will just go ahead and dive right in. So first, if everybody wants to just, give a brief introduction, of their background, how they discovered Constellation Hypergraph Network, we'll just dive right into that.
Hey, my name's Dagnam. I've been in the healthcare industry for about 20 years. I've also been a retail investor, and most of my focus has been on technology, data, and internet security. Constellation was actually the first crypto that I invested in because of what they were doing with the Hypergraph. Once it became clear to me that they made a cryptographically secure protocol that's able to handle any data with no limitations on a feeless network, I knew that this is something that I had to get into. And getting in early is the key.
Barry, you want to go ahead next?
Hey guys, this is Bitcoin Prophet 1, aka Barry. Hope everyone's doing great. I discovered Constellation in 2018. I got into crypto in 2017. I fell in love with the team, with their track record of success with multiple tech companies coming from the technology space, including NASA, where the chief technology officer has a background and expertise in. Got into crypto 2017, have been a very passionate investor, both on the token and equity side. More recently, a couple of years ago, got into NFTs. I'm actually an equity investor in the Constellation business, which is very exciting. And in my full-time life, I wish I did crypto full-time, but I do not. I work in the executive search world for consumer brands, helping to place C-level executives for incredible consumer companies across the world in the United States. And delighted to be here with some amazing people. Thank you, guys.
Brian?
Hey guys, I am Brian, or Bob on Twitter. My background is a bit varied. I'm a bit of a generalist. I was in academia for many years teaching law, constitutional law, and legal philosophy. And I then became a technology lawyer in Silicon Valley, in Redwood City in San Francisco, working with a lot of crypto companies in my client list. And I first heard about DAG. I've been in crypto for quite a while, since I think 2014, when I was going to Bitcoin meetups in San Francisco. But I found out about DAG from my mate George, who's a big DAG Chad in the community. So shout out to George, thank you. And yeah, I've just been, obviously very enamored with it. And I think it is the future.
Awesome. Pete, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my name is Pete. I've been in crypto actually a very long time, since 2011, 2012, dabbling with Bitcoin on a platform once upon a time called the Silk Road. And, ever since then, I've just kind of been sniffing around it and seeing what's been going on. And I'd like to shout out Channing Frye for putting Constellation DAG on my radar at the beginning of this year, actually. And it was just a slow process of, adding it to my watch list, along with every other project that any single influencer is shouting out. And as you just do more and more research, it's like, I always say the only downside to Constellation is it starts to make other projects just look horrible. So slowly, it's just been a transition into becoming a maxi. And now here I am helping the community, and having Nat and anyone else just throw people in my DMs to answer questions. I'm always very happy to do it. And I always learn so much from guys like Brian and Dagnam and Bitcoin Prophet 1. So it's just like me paying forward that same luxury of knowledge and education.
Awesome. So a lot of my watchers know that, the viewers know that I'm just, I'm a science guy, I'm a big CRISPR guy, genomics, things like that. But I want to thank Pete for putting this, on the map for me. I never knew about Constellation, also known as DAG, DAG. So, he's the one who sort of introduced me to all of you guys. I've seen a lot of your videos, a lot of your posts. I was super intrigued. And so I think I've been, I wrote this on Twitter. I think I've been studying about 4 to 5 hours every night for the past 7 or 8 nights. So I think this is going to be a really good learning opportunity for me to, cover other things that are still sort of confusing to me, or things that I can't fully wrap my head around. And I think the listeners will really appreciate the discussion that we have today. So I just want to point out that a lot of the listeners are versed, and then there's a lot of listeners that aren't really versed in blockchain and this topic. So hopefully we'll cover this, in detail, but also on a level where all the laymen can also hopefully understand what we're discussing today. So the first question I want to get into is, what is a blockchain? And so if anybody wants to just dive in and, explain that, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, so I think I can take this one. So in its raw form, blockchain, like as a data structure, it's a linked list. So just a list of items that refer to each other. Each item refers to the next item in the list. So in a blockchain, the item is a block, which is a group of transactions. And that block encodes the signature of the previous block, and so on, and all the way back to the original Genesis block. So that they're all chained together cryptographically. And essentially that ensures the integrity of those blocks. And a blockchain is hosted over a network where miners are basically bundling all of these transactions into blocks, and they are spending computational resources to do that in a proof of work system, which is the original system used for Bitcoin. And essentially they are rewarded periodically for that effort as well. So the Bitcoin miners, right, all get rewarded. I think it's now 6.25 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. And the rewards sort of dynamically adjust, so they get emitted. The difficulty increases as more people join the network, and they are issued every 10 minutes or so. So a lot of people will join a mining pool, and they get some fraction of the total rewards that they earn. So essentially, it's this decentralized, what's sometimes described as a decentralized ledger that contains all the transactions that are verified, collated together and verified by these nodes, each of which has a full copy, right? So it's a highly redundant ledger, because even if all the nodes go down, one of the nodes is still up, it can, retain the ledger and its integrity. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
Awesome. So if anybody wants to add,
Yeah, I think that's what Brian was alluding there to, is like, what's really different about Constellation's network is essentially each node can run a separate chain, right? So it's like a network of networks.
Awesome. And so we know that these blockchains use, as Brian referenced to, proof of work and proof of stake, I believe. And so what exactly is a consensus when we talk about a blockchain?
So consensus is basically how you establish trust and truth at any given state.
And so
so it's so typically, it's either the nodes are rewarded or they're penalized based on their.
So what exactly is the hypergraph then?
The hypergraph is the data pipeline, that all the data is going to be transmitted across the network. It's the rails, if you were.
It's the highway system by which all the data moves across the Constellation network. Whatever the data is, that's how it goes back and forth on those highways, if you will. The DAG.
And so, if you guys feel comfortable, we can go into it at a high level, so we can sort of, if we can cover the hypergraph and then sort of understand what the PRO consensus is, so the proof of reputable observation, and how is that different from proof of stake and proof of work from traditional blockchains?
Yeah, I mean, one thing to say is so the DAG, directed acyclic graph, is what DAG stands for. And it rather than a chain, right, a linear chain, which is what a blockchain looks like, right? It's a sequence of blocks. A DAG looks more like a web visually. Okay. And in the hypergraph, in the Constellation DAG hypergraph, what you have is, rather than excuse me, synchronous consensus amongst all the nodes on the network that is focused on the current block that's being created, you have nodes that can basically work on different things at the same time. So they can work in parallel. So they call that concurrent consensus, or parallel consensus, or asynchronous consensus. And it essentially means that they can each divide the workload amongst themselves. So that's essentially the difference. From a data structure perspective, it looks very different. It looks more like a web. In terms of the consensus that Constellation use, it's different. Proof of work, you essentially have miners who are spending computational resources doing work in order to, hash the blocks and crack the algorithm and earn the block rewards. Proof of stake is different because you have nodes staking, tokens, vouching for the fact that they are giving a correct account of the ledger, right? They're basically saying, I'm going to put this money up, and if I'm wrong, then it will get slashed. Okay. And so it's different from proof of work. It's more directly it's more directly financial in nature. Proof of work is still financial because you still got to pay for that electricity for the computational resources. But proof of stake, you're actually explicitly vouching using money for the state of the ledger, and that you're reporting it accurately. In Constellation DAG's hypergraph, they use proof of reputable observation. And essentially what that means is that each node has a reputation. Each node in the hypergraph has a reputation, and they are observing the hypergraph around them in the adjacent nodes. The hypergraph is being sort of beamed at them, and they're saying, yes, this is correct. Okay. And their reputation means that if they've got a good reputation, they're trusted by the rest of the nodes in the network. And if it turns out that they are lying, then they still do get slashed. You still do lose DAG, so there is still a financial dimension to it. But it's different because this reputational element means that it's not it's more nuanced, really. It allows for the network to remember the good behavior of a node in the past, which is very different, right? Because in the Bitcoin network, for example, it's all just about the computational resources you're spending at that moment in time, okay? But it's sort of, in a sense, wasteful to forget that somebody has been behaving well throughout their entire lifetime of functioning on a network. So what the DAG hypergraph does is it takes into account previous good behavior and rewards that with a reputation, which in turn means that you've got more prospects for rewards, more likely you're going to be, sort of leveraged in the future. And so that's really the thing. It's a meritocracy, right? Because it's about how well have you been performing. Right? If you're performing well, you get a good reputation and you're rewarded more, right? You can compare that meritocratic system with proof of stake, which is really ruled by the rich, which is a plutocracy, right? It essentially says, the more that you stake, the more that you're likely to be telling the truth. And I think, without going down that rabbit hole too much, I think it's a deeply flawed system. And these are flaws that I think the people pushing these protocols, pushing the proof of stake systems, just don't want to acknowledge because, they're neck deep in these things now. But I think that basically they're fundamentally economically problematic because the more wealth you gain, the more your marginal utility decreases, and thus the less secure it becomes over time. Anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole just yet.
No, yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Welcome,
no,
Eric, by the way.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, everyone. How's it? Sorry, I'm late to the party here with all you handsome gentlemen. I was had a little bit of a calendar conflict, but I'm happy to be on. Nat, nice to meet you. All you other guys, nice to see
meet
you again. Bob, I'm super jealous of the stash. If only my wife would let me. So not going to be able to do that. Maybe next Halloween. So we'll see how's it going. Barry, how you doing?
Hooray!
That's my man right there. So good to see you guys. And Bob, I agree with every single thing that you just said. I could hear that 10 more times. So happy to see all of you.
So Eric, we were just trying to understand, what is a blockchain, what is proof of work, proof of stake, and we wanted to compare it to a DAG, Constellation's DAG, and what exactly their PRO, proof of reputable observation, is, and then kind of compare, what are the pros and cons of using PRO. I think Brian touched on it, efficiency, the asynchronous, and I think even Wyatt, he mentions immutability, which I don't know if many people understand what immutability really is. So if you guys can sort of touch on that about the DAG.
Yeah, so I first want to say Bob is probably the best resource for all that stuff. So let me tell you, you are so lucky to have him on here, because he is he's quite the resource, and he's someone that I check in with too, to make sure that my understanding is correct at times as well. So just want to say Bob is or Brian, whatever we're calling him these days, the ultimate resource for that. But I want to talk about, Bob, you said something about how the people that are pushing these systems typically mostly have the most to gain, and proof of stake is definitely a system that rewards the biggest stakeholders and continues to reward the biggest stakeholders as time goes on. And you can also see something like that in proof of stake, where it's maybe not who has the most supply, but who has most control over the network with mining power. So it's like when people talk about decentralization, there's always some level of centralization so far that we've seen in most of these systems. And it's like this argument where I don't think people really understand the technology side, and therefore they kind of miss this whole idea of what it means to actually be a true distributed network where there's no one local point of centralization. And so far, we've seen that with proof of stake, and proof of stake becomes more centralized as time goes on. Proof of work, whoever has the most money, the most power, that wants to set up the most mining rigs and pay for that electricity, has the most power. And we can see what happens with the network effect when someone like China comes along and wants to all of a sudden ban mining, and what happens to the network. But now we have what we have going on with Constellation's DAG, is proof of reputable observation. And to me, this seems like the one solution I've seen thus far. And now, mind you, I don't know everything that's going on in this space. I know a good amount. I stay up to date. I read things. I read white papers. I like getting into the fundamentals. I enjoy the technology. I like learning about these things. But so far, this is the one system I've seen that, as time goes on, actually becomes more and more decentralized. So to me, when I first came across Constellation, I was like, this is the one where I'm planting my flag for now. This truly is the network that, after all the things that I've seen over the years that I've been involved in crypto, is the one project that I can literally say, I think this one is going to be the one, if successful, which it's looking like it will truly bring about the mass adoption of cryptocurrency into everyday business, everyday operations, because they have that no fee model. They're infinitely scalable. They're fast, so they can handle microtransactions and all these little operations on something like Ethereum you can't do, because I think it was actually you, Bob, who said something like, if you had a social media that was running on top of a distributed network, you can't pay to like a post. That's ridiculous. You just can't. There's certain things that you can't pay fees for on top of a distributed network, because over time it would just be ridiculous, and you wouldn't put it on a distributed network. So I truly think that, and I know this doesn't really touch on the immutability piece, but all blockchains in essence are immutable unless they have something in their backdoor that's a little shady. But it's essentially a linked list, right? That's pointing to the next block, or the next part of the ledger where all the confirmations are confirmed. But then that record becomes immutable, and it can't be changed. So it actually opens up the door for a lot of things like being able to understand what the truth of something is. And in Constellation's case, you'll be able to do that in real time. So you get a real time recording of what history is, because the confirmations that are coming onto the ledger, they're secured and they can't ever be changed. So that alone, that one little benefit alone of a network like Constellation has a lot of unique use cases. I mean, you can think about voting, you can think about just recording history in general, what's happening. It opens up the door for, it removes actually the ability to manipulate data for one's own benefit. And that's one of the reasons why I'm personally a big fan of these distributed networks.
I just want to hop in and say the most important word here, in my opinion, is reputation. Forget technology for a second. Each and every individual has a reputation, good, bad, in the middle. It takes years to build up that reputation and seconds to destroy. And when we think about reputation in the terms and in the context of blockchain, and forget even blockchain for a second, but in the context of investing and forming friendships, it's all about really who are the people we want to align ourselves with? Who are the companies we want to be a part of? What are the companies we want to be a part of? And what are the companies that we want to take our hard-earned capital and really invest in to help them grow and prosper? While, of course, there's always a little bit of a financial incentive, hopefully. I think that goes without saying. But, look, as an equity investor in Constellation, the company, and also as a large DAG holder, the most important thing for me is the team with their reputation built up over a long track record of years in Silicon Valley, years of entrepreneurs, and years, of course, building up their own networks based on trust, based on reputation. I think that's really critical to the success of a company like Constellation. To Eric's point, that's why Constellation will succeed, because these guys have team members across the country, and the business that they are building and have built truly is and continues to set itself apart from truly every other distributed ledger technology in the space, whether tokenized or not. So at that kind of base layer foundation level, reputation really drives the whole world. It determines who wants to work with us, be friends with us, who we want to work with and be friends with. So, that for me is something that's critical. And I think everyone here would agree. Reputation is really, it's something that never ends, and it never will, kind of like a blockchain, unless it gets forked, which we've seen many times with Ethereum Classic becoming Ethereum, Bitcoin being forked many times, which of course benefits the large Bitcoin holders. But Constellation as well cannot be forked, which is something that is very, very important to notice and to note as well.
Yeah, and sort of to build off of that trust and reputation, one of the major differences between running a node on the network and PRO score affecting it is you're essentially have a business, right? And it's up to you to maintain that business, and you will be rewarded, and you own that. Unlike some of these other networks that you can get a node in, and once you stake your tokens for the node, you no longer own that. You can't withdraw that or move it around. Like, let's say I wanted to participate in the Alchemy state channel, I can move my node over to the Alchemy state channel, but then maybe Double Dice is incentivizing me, or maybe I like Double Dice a little bit more, so I can just move my node over there. Or maybe for whatever reason I just want to withdraw from the whole system. I can do that. I'm in full control over my ownership, which is a huge difference.
Yeah, and something I just want to touch on that's important to grasp moving forward, when Bob, Brian, Dagnam, Mr. Digital Dive, Barry, all of these guys are talking about what the Hypergraph and what Constellation can do. I just want to make something very clear. Constellation is a tech company that exists. I think Mr. Digital Dive touched on this in one of his videos. And the Hypergraph is a protocol that exists. And if you've ever done due diligence on other crypto projects, a lot of your new listeners now that aren't familiar to crypto, that might seem like a weird concept. Like, why are you even clarifying this? No, it's not. It is a rare thing to have a tech company with a tool, an instrument a technology that actually works, and then you tokenize access to it. It's almost backwards, which in itself is a backwards process, because things should exist before you invest in them. And I think for me, coming from FinTwit, the stock side of things with Nat, him and I would talk about genomics before anything. What got me back into crypto and became like my biggest light bulb moment was like, okay, this is something tangible. This is something that has use. And this is something that companies are going to use because it exists. And when we're talking about what Hypergraph can do, it's because it is what it does. It's not, hey, when we get enough money, funding, when you invest Q4, this might exist. No, these are the metrics of the Hypergraph, and this is what Constellation is doing. And another big light bulb moment that a lot of people have had is when I start showing them, deals with the DoD. They're not investing in an idea. They're not investing in anything hypothetical. They've done their due diligence and they say, this works. When I show them the acquisition of Door technology, which other crypto project has acquisitions? That's such a stock-minded, business-minded move, but that's what Constellation is doing. It's really marrying the best of both worlds. So that's why I think it's great that Nat is doing this, because you have a lot of stock people on your side of things that kind of look at crypto as this weird thing that's like, this doesn't exist, but it does. It's a tech company with a groundbreaking technology.
Right. And you mentioned that Department of Defense contract, but I want to get all of that. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too quickly, because I think that a lot of people are still going to need like this basic foundation. But you did mention that utility, and that the utility is there. But I sort of just want to cover like, what is a layer 1? What is a layer 2? And then what are some examples of layer 1 and layer 2s? And then use that question to spearhead into sort of what is a layer 0 protocol that the Constellation network is, and why is it, is it improving? Is it optimizing these other layers? And I would love to hear some of your thoughts about that.
Brian, you want to tackle that one?
Sure. Yeah. So like layer 1, some examples of layer 1s are Bitcoin and Ethereum. Essentially, these are the original protocols. The Bitcoin blockchain was the first. It is essentially a distributed ledger where you can record account balances and transactions between accounts. And it was proof of concept for decentralized money. Ethereum is also a layer 1, but it's quite different because it essentially enabled smart contracts, which are essentially self-executing computer code run in the Ethereum virtual machine, decentralized computer. What they were calling the world computer, I think. I don't know if they still call it that so much, but essentially it enables individuals to transact, individuals who don't know one another to transact at arm's length using a smart contract that executes upon the fulfillment of certain pre-specified conditions. Could be an options contract that hits, strike price or something like that. But those were both layer 1s. They were the original protocols. Layer 2s are essentially reactions to the failures of layer 1, right? Layer 1s like Ethereum don't scale, and they will never in themselves be capable of scaling. And their inability to scale, actually, it's not just technical, it's also financial, right? There's certain things like Ethereum network fees hard coded into the Ethereum code base. So essentially, for those reasons, layer 2s emerged. Now, layer 2s basically took a lot of the computational workload off chain onto more efficient parallel side chains or lightning networks, and basically said, look, we're going to do the hard graft here, and then we will basically bundle all of that, the results, the output, and put it back on chain in a cryptographically verified way. So really all we're putting is like a little, a hash from all this workload onto the chain. So there's less memory and there's less, overhead for the L1. So layer 2s, are there's loads of them out there now, and that's what they are. And they've, there's a great variety of them. Some of them do different things. Some of them connect differently. Like some of them use oracles to put the results back on chain from the layer 2 computations. But that's really it in summary form.
So what is special about layer 0 and its ability to, bring interoperability?
Oh, well, lots. I guess like layer zero, as the name suggests, sits underneath layer one, right? What it does is essentially it can plug into all of the layer ones, okay? And it can represent the state of all layer one chains in itself, right? In its own, in the hypergraph, okay? So it basically can represent the state of all these chains and do various computations with respect to those chains, but in a much more powerful and quicker and cheaper way. And that's what the hypergraph enables. But layer zero also means that it can plug into legacy data systems as well. And basically it can plug into anything that is data, which is everything, right? Because everything is data. So it sort of evokes the like Tibetan term like sunyata, the sort of like zero implies everything, right? Nothing implies everything, everything implies nothing. And the hypergraph, by plugging into, by essentially having this expressive power, by using data as its fundamental unit, it can model all of these other blockchains as well as traditional financial legacy systems. It can plug into the stock market. It can actually model the real world. You know, that's what the Air Force are using it in their joint domain command and control. So there are really no limits to what it can express, the expressive power of it. And it's hard to, I don't think people understand like the true significance of that. This isn't like just about tokens, right?
Yeah.
This isn't just another blockchain. This is something different and much, much more powerful.
Oh, Pete, do you, I guess, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, to sort of piggyback off of that, like what really makes this stuff super unique is unlike other new technologies like Cardano, for instance, that can swap one data type for another. What DAG can do is it can take multiple different data types all at the same time and stack them on top of each other and then compress that and then make that like a data type. And then you can feed in even more data types on top of that and then stack and then compress. So it's...
And so just to reference, Cardano is another layer one, sort of like Bitcoin and Ethereum, correct?
Yes.
And so Bob mentioned this. I guess in summary from what Brian was saying, I'm gonna call him Brian and Bob, I might switch off. But Brian was saying that it's, I guess in summary, it's sort of like data agnostic. Is that the right way to mention it?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
And what? Sorry for interrupting. Well, what it says is basically like that the innovative aspect here, and maybe this I think people don't understand quite what he means here, but he says that he can perform, the hypergraph performs consensus using only types, right? Okay. So you've got data types within the hypergraph. For instance, say you create a token that you launch on the hypergraph. That would be an L0 token. That's the name of the hypergraph's data standard for tokens. Like you can, basically the data is all transported around the network by all the devices, and it's validated by other data packets as it's being transmitted around at every interval, right? So it's end-to-end consensus using all of these flowing data types and bundles of data. And as Dagnam says, they're stacked into hierarchies, and that's interesting for a few different reasons. But yeah, it's all about data types.
So Pete, do you want to add anything over there?
Yeah, I mean, something to take note of is, and we were talking about this, off record before we started recording, is that more and more you're going to start seeing projects come out as layer zeros. In reality, if you understand the true mechanism and definition of what a layer zero is, which we're going to get into here, there is only one true layer zero. And it's just been funny to see how Twitter and a lot of social media has gone from poo-pooing the notion of a layer zero to Polkadot's layer zero. Kusama's the layer zero of the layer zero. IOTA just branded as a layer zero, and God bless him. I like a lot of those projects, have a lot of immense respect for a lot of people in the blockchain space, but there's only one true layer 0, and in the way that it underpins and solves pretty much every data related issue, and it provides so many data related solutions is truly game breaking. And I think it was Mr. Digital Dive in one of his videos, or maybe it was Brian. At this point, I've just consumed so much Constellation content and just gets jumbled up. So maybe I'll have to create a bibliography or something after this. But in one of the videos, it was talking about, it was a one-way relationship between Constellation and all these other blockchain technologies. And it's because blockchains inherently are like a supermarket, and you have one really, really long line to check out at the supermarket. Blockchains, all these layer 1s are like the manager walking up and saying, hey, get me my fastest checkout clerk. It's not going to make the line any more efficient or speed up anymore. These DLTs, DAG, Constellation is like opening 8 more lanes, or even another grocery store. Like, you can only accomplish so much with these setups that inherently create a bottleneck issue.
Yeah, there's no bottleneck in the hypergraph, because like what I was saying earlier, that each node is capable of running its own chain, right? So it's like a network of networks. And this is where the infinitely scalable part comes into play, is it adapts to the network needs.
Yep.
And nobody else does that.
Yeah. And what I want to say here is, like, you see all these, it's almost like a marketing tactic that you see now. It's like, oh, we have 1,000 TPS. Oh, we have 10,000. Oh, we have 100,000 TPS. And it's like, it really is just like, at this point, like, really something that a lot of these chains use to kind of like one up each other. Like, how much throughput do you have compared to this other project? And one of the things that's interesting about the hypergraph is that whole conversation is irrelevant, because the hypergraph just scales dynamically to the need that needs to be met on the network, because it scale and it becomes faster the more participants join the network, which is a lot different than a lot of what these other networks, where they have this like upper threshold where it's like, once they hit that ceiling, like, they're in trouble, because what they're trying to do is say, we're going to try to, whether they're doing it via something like sharding or whatever type of architecture way that they're trying to create greater throughput. Let's say it's 100,000. Well, that's your 100,000 limit. What happens if you reached like a global mass scale adoption, but you needed 1 billion? Like, you're dead in the water, like, because now you have another broken system. So what you need is, you can't have a system that has like a high upper limit. You need a system that can dynamically and elastically expand and be able to meet the need that's currently happening through the network. So what Constellation has done with the hypergraph is, they've made the throughput debate or discussion a non-topic to speak about, because it just meets the demand that is necessary in order to be scalable, and it increases as more people come onto the network, which is definitely not how a lot of these other networks work, which becomes more congested as more participants join.
And just on top of that,
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just want to say on top of that point, Eric, we've seen some real world examples we've seen with blockchain L1s that could not, that, for example, shut down right away. They could not handle the load. Cardano, Solana, they had dApps that went live. People all jumped onto the blockchain, minting NFTs. Solana went down for 17 hours. And that's not the purpose of a blockchain, to go down.
Right.
Now, kudos to Bitcoin for getting it right, having near perfect uptime, like 99.99999%. Even though it came out 12 years ago, that is astounding. So kudos to Bitcoin where that's due. But, I think it's really important to recognize that for something as important as a business like Constellation, kind of cleaning and securing that data with the Department of Defense, with public companies, all the way to growth brands around the world, it's not acceptable for that blockchain or for the DLT to go down. Otherwise, all these companies, brands, governments are at risk and are not secure.
Can anybody, you guys mentioned TPS and throughput and scalability. Just for the layman, just to understand what exactly, and you mentioned sharding too. For the layman, could you guys just quickly cover what TPS and sharding is? Just, so they can, I don't want anybody to get lost.
Yeah.
Transactions per second.
Yeah. So TPS is like, it basically just means transactions per second. And I want to say for the audience too, listen, getting involved in this world is like another full-time job. You have great resources, and it's awesome, Nat, that you're doing this for your audience, because this world can be very confusing. You need to learn a whole new dictionary of terminology.
Yeah, lingo.
It changes really fast. One of the reasons why we love it so much is because there's incredible opportunity. It's the same reason why it gets so much bad rap, because things do change really fast, and that can be maybe too risky or volatile for people, which I completely understand. So kudos to everyone that's trying to get involved in your audience, that's trying to get involved in this, because it's not easy. It takes a lot of time. It changes all the time. So kudos to anyone that's trying to learn more and get into this space. So I first want to say that. But yes, TPS stands for transactions per second, and it's actually a metric that is used to determine, I guess you could say, the efficiency or power, if you will, of a network. So how many transactions per second can actually go through the network, and the higher that number is, then technically the more scalable it is. So if I had only 10 transactions per second, but I had 10,000 transactions coming through the blockchain, obviously there's a bottleneck, because I have a lake of 10,000 transactions, but I can only actually execute on 10 at a time. So that's where you have a longer, what's called confirmation time. So the transaction isn't confirmed for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, which if you've ever been around in some of the earlier crypto days, the nail biting experience when you go to send a transaction and you're waiting 5 hours, 10 hours, and you're just like, I hope I didn't lose all my money, double checking your wallet addresses, hoping that you made, you got everything correct. So that's what TPS stands for, transactions per second.
Yeah, and sharding is just a method of splitting and storing data to multiple databases. So it's like what we were talking about earlier, because a blockchain, you can only do one, it's sequential, right? And so that's, as what Brian was saying, it's a method to offload some of that work, because it's baked into their system, and they can't do anything about the network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now that we're on the topic of data, which I think at the heart is what Constellation's network is, they are trying to process big data and secure big data. How in the world do they actually process so much data, in comparison to a blockchain, when we think about blocks? And then if we think about, I think Wyatt termed it a tetrahedron, does that have anything to do with the ability to, process so much data on the hypergraph?
So Brian can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe what Wyatt was referring to with the tetrahedron is it's a way that they are, because you have all these different edges, right? And so what they're able to do with the hypergraph is they're able to make a basically 4-dimensional structure out of the data, and that's where you can stack these multiple data types on top of each other. That's basically the layman's term explanation on the tetrahedrons.
And it actually, if you read Wyatt's blockchain cohomology paper, this falls right out of the mathematics, right? The way that he's essentially elicited the mathematical structure that is latent in distributed ledger technology, right? He has made it explicit and formalized it, and then he's implemented it in a technology. So the whole tetrahedron thing, it comes from the chain complex, which is the mathematical term for a blockchain, more or less. It's a sort of a chain of polytopes or simplexes, which are essentially tetrahedrons in arbitrary dimensions. Okay, so it gets pretty deep, and that paper, that's only his first. His next one is about generative calculus. So he invented I think he invented a new type of calculus. You know, so like it's and it is a doozy to try to like to read and to make sense of it if you don't have the sort of science, math, physics background. But you know, the tetrahedrons, when I was looking over constants in the place, and that there was something very interesting here, because I know like tetrahedrons are very interesting structures. They are essentially the most efficient volume that you can create for maximizing surface area. So it encloses the least volume and the greatest surface area. And when you're dealing with data, surface area is a space for expression, right? It gives you more surface area, means more expressive power. And the units in Constellation Hypergraph are essentially tetrahedrons. Buckminster-Fuller, there's lots of interesting connections that loads of people have pointed out with Buckminster-Fuller, but you know, he was the guy who he has this whole concept of synergetics, like naturally occurring symmetries in nature, and why they're really powerful and useful. You know, his geodesic dome is sort of like triangles on the surface of a sphere, and it has a very stable structure. Well, the hypergraph is essentially a similar thing, right? You're forming in the hypergraph's consensus, you have consensus being performed amongst three nodes, and they form a triangle. And when you triangulate the triangles, you get a tetrahedron. Essentially, you're creating this tessellation, which is actually the name of their code base. You're creating this surface of consensus across the hypergraph. And so that's where the tetrahedrons fit in. In terms of how can it process so much, I mean, it's harvesting computational power from every device that connects to it, which, you know, is theoretically every device in the world. You know, like it has the hardware requirements for nodes are very low if you compare to something like Solana, where I think you need a lot of servers to run a node. With this, you can participate as a light node using your mobile phone. You know, so that's where all the computational power comes from.
Yeah, and I get a lot of questions about that. Like, you know, what are the requirements for running a node? And I guess Pete references to the white paper. You know, every time I send somebody his way with that question, it's that you can literally run a node on a mobile device. You know, it doesn't require, you know, so much computational power. And like you guys mentioned way earlier in the podcast, that we're not mining. This isn't proof of work.
Yeah, well, you need almost no power to run a node from this. And this is why I think that the Door acquisition was such a huge thing, right? So when that gets fully integrated into the system, I mean, you're talking about something that you know, is about like this big, that just runs on battery power, you know, and that's it. I mean, you could hook up a Wi-Fi toaster and and run a node from that toaster.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And that connects to the whole Internet of Things dimension here, right? Like this is theoretically going to connect to your fridge, your toaster, your alarm clock. You know, like it has that capacity, and I mean, it has huge potential for machine to machine communication. You know, like enabling.
So you don't need a big you know, $20,000 mining rig or whatever. You know, right. I mean, you can link up to the network with a mobile device, or you know, anything that has internet connection to it.
And so now, Dagnam, you actually mentioned that the way you went down this rabbit hole is that you started off with Palantir. And I actually, when I was reading about DAG, it really seemed like, you know, what I'm reading is sort of sounds like DAG is cut from the same cloth as Palantir. So they're both trying to harness all this data and make sense of data or process data, or, you know, there's so much revolving around data. People say data is the new gold. So there's a few steps that I want to mention. So there's at the top of the hierarchy or the triangle, there's raw data creation, where everything is data. And then a step below is open source data processing. Below that is big data management. And then below is enterprise customers, where these people are leveraging the data for a particular use case or to monetize. So does anybody want to, discuss this triangle or this hierarchy of, where raw data creation is at the top, and where does DAG's Constellation fit in?
Well, DAG, is tokenized data. And what's interesting about DAG's tokenized data is it's interoperable with any system. So these enterprise systems can leverage that and plug in whatever existing system that they have. They don't need to invest in a new system to be able to plug in, right? And the programming language that DAG is based off of is Java, right? Mm-hmm. It's not this new programming language that somebody needs to know. I mean, Java's probably the world's largest. I mean, everybody uses Java, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing that a lot of these enterprises are going to take full advantage over is this feeless network, right? It's not going to cost them anything to participate, right? And so that right there is going to be a game changer, I think.
And also, I've heard this argument be made several times of in regards to Ethereum, just in regard to the fee, like pay per transaction model, is those fees are a security feature because they say that it prevents things like attacks. Well, Constellation was able to create a feeless network without sacrificing any security, which I think is really important, because I think a lot of people, when they hear feeless network, some of the more savvy or more seasoned blockchain technology people will then say, well, how do you maintain things like network security, prevent things like DDoS attacks? Like, how do you prevent stuff like that? It's like, well, we haven't had to sacrifice that. We have a feeless network that we haven't had to sacrifice on scalability, decentralization, or security with our model, and we've been able to achieve all these things. And for a lot of people, it seems almost too good to be true, but it's real. It works. People are building on it. So the DoD, they're not gonna, and I know we can save the DoD talk for later, but they don't award any money to people without doing their own due diligence first with their own people. So an important fact. But
I love that you mentioned the DoD. So the DoD is the Department of Defense, and that Constellation Network actually has a collaboration, I would say, or a contract with Constellation Network.
Yeah, the Department of Defense is Constellation's largest paying customer.
Got it.
That's a very, very big distinction when you compare this company to projects in the space that are just partnering crypto to crypto. Constellation actually works with federal entities, public companies, and growing businesses.
Mm-hmm. And I actually read that the Air Force is the largest producer of data. So that's just another point that I want to hit on. And not only being the largest producer of data, they get, these absurd amounts of budget, money from the government. So I think I read somewhere it's like anywhere from 700 billion to 800 billion per year. And a piece of that is going to be eventually going to Constellation's network. Mm-hmm. Does anybody want to touch on that? Touch on, the Air Force, the DoD, how exactly is Constellation Network going to be incorporating their technology into the Air Force?
Yeah, so I'll step in here for this one. So one of the things that just like knocking things over on my desk, one of the things that is really important for the DoD, right, is they have all these different agencies, right? So specifically for those who don't know, the Constellation received a phase 2 contract for working with an entity within the DoD called US Transcom, or the Defense Transportation System. So what US Transcom does is it oversees the movement of the world's most powerful and valuable assets. You're talking about not just aircraft, but also ships, other land assets as well. So they're like a very broad mobility entity for the Department of Defense. And US Transcom operates in over 80% of the countries worldwide. So they are one of, if not the largest creator of data on the entire planet. So when you're talking about finding a good use case for what this network can do, what better use case than going to the absolute top of data creation, which is US Transcom. So specifically, the phase 2 contract was, yes, it's with the DoD, but they're working directly with US Transcom. So it's important to have that distinction. Now, when you talk about being able to be interoperable, one of the reasons why Constellation got the contract was because the DoD didn't have to make any changes to current existing systems that they have. So that was one of the reasons why they were able to do it and beat out some of the other competitors for what they were doing, is because Constellation showed up and said, hey, you don't have to rearrange your entire backend, which is another $100 billion. We can plug in directly with what you're doing right now and integrate your data types whenever you want. So that kind of goes back to what Bob was talking about with types, like what data types are you trying to actually validate? And the question is, well, which ones do you want to validate? Is it a sensor in a plane? Is it a computer to computer from one of these agencies to another agencies? Because one of the biggest problems that the entire DoD has is transferring information between agencies, because a lot of the times when you're sharing confidential information, you're going from one siloed network to another siloed network. So let's say if US Transcom needs to send information to the Marines, or the Marines need to send something to the Navy, but it's really sensitive information. Remember, this is the military. This is the most sensitive information on the planet that could cause a war, get people killed or injured if that information isn't secured and transferred in a timely manner. What if an enemy intercepts that information and it's not secure? What does that do for things like national security or the safety of our troops or our military assets? So what they did was they showed up and said, hey, you don't need to make any changes to your current infrastructure. We can validate any data types and integrate any data types that you're looking, and we can ensure a secure data pipeline between the different agencies within the DoD to make sure that when you transfer information, we can not only validate the information itself, but the source of the information and making sure that it's the right one. And that unlocks a whole new world for the Department of Defense, who previously was, I don't even want to know how much they were spending on things like data engineers to make sure that we're scrubbing the data. When it gets to here, we have the red tape that makes sure that then these people need to see it and validate and make sure that it's true. And then we're talking to this people. And that's too much time. When you're working with that level of sensitive data, that's too much time. It could actually get people killed. So that's essentially what they're doing with the Department of Defense right now. And really, the sky's the limit, no pun intended on like the Air Force thing. But really, it's like, okay, well, you can connect sensors to these planes, to sensors on someone like an infantry person's sensor on their body on the battlefield, to a sensor in a land vehicle, such as like a tank or a heads-up display on a helmet. Like, you can integrate all these different sensors into one system where you're validating the source of that information and you're validating the information itself. So that's what Constellation showed up to do. And one of the other things that I want to touch on that they're doing is it's not just the DoD itself, but also other people involved, such as the Civil Reserve Air Fleet. So they're also working with the Civil Reserve Air Fleet. And what the Civil Reserve Air Fleet is they're people like Delta, Southwest, Omni Air International, JetBlue, American Airlines, all these international and domestic airlines, because a perfect example was actually something that just happened. We all know that there was just a big thing that happened in Kabul in Afghanistan, where we were trying to evacuate people out of Afghanistan. Well, who showed up? It was the Civil Reserve Air Fleet that actually sprung into action as like a contractor for the DoD to carry out military operations. Now, the interesting thing about that is, how do you take a giant organization as something like, let's say, American Airlines, and then now integrate them with the DoD to now communicate mission critical sensitive data that could get people killed if it's in the wrong hands, right? That's where Constellation can show up and say, hey, we can make sure that we create a secure data pipeline between someone like the Civil Reserve Air Fleet and the US Transcom to ensure that when we're exchanging information, it's the right information and that it's safe and that it doesn't get in the wrong hands. And we're able to do it in real time so we know where all of our assets are. So that's what Constellation shows up and what they're able to do. So the contract itself, specifically, again, the US Transcom, Air Mobility Command, the Air Operations Center, 618th Division, and the Civil Reserve Air Fleet.
And just on top of that, Eric, those are all phenomenal points. I think we're all very, very aware of all the hacking and all the data theft that goes on around the world, either by dangerous actors, foreign operatives that are trying to hack the Pentagon, for example, to other areas of even public companies' data on credit card usage, credit card users. I mean, even look at the Ledger hack. Multiple hundreds of, I think it was like millions of people had their data hacked, personal addresses, phone numbers, which is very dangerous considering, there's a lot of people on that list that have quite substantial amounts of crypto. So even at a kind of a day-to-day, when you think about this on a day-to-day basis, the protection of data is so critical because data, to an earlier point, is everything and it's everywhere. So if that data is not protected, if it's not secured, then we're in a world of trouble. But fortunately, the real world applicability that Constellation brings to the table, that brings to the government, that brings to companies, and really to the average data user, which is everyone, it can't be understated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are interested in. Yeah, go ahead.
I think something that is important to kind of note is that, as I've touched on from my perspective as originally a stock guy that's kind of gone in and out of crypto, I'm constantly doing DD on my largest positions just to keep up with what's happening. Mm-hmm. And I remember the time that it was so serendipitous. I just learned about the DD contract, the DoD contract on the Hypergraph hour. I think it was number 28 or 27 or something. And then I was doing research on Palantir because that's also my largest holding in stocks. And I'm watching Cathie Wood explain why she loves Palantir. And she's talking about how all the biggest innovations come from government contracts. The most lucrative deals in history have come from government contracts. And the longest tenured deals in history come from government contracts. And it's because of the nature of the data that these entities get exposed to. Once the DoD lets you into their data, do you know what it's going to take for them to transfer over to another protocol or to another business? It's not a casual thing. This isn't a DoD contract, which I see on social media all the times. It's just a tester. Listen, Anon, there's no such thing as a tester with a government entity. You're in, you're in. It's not like, here, take a little look at this and then, we'll see how it works. No. Phase 2 means you're in because there is no other equivalent type of relationship with an entity like the DoD. And it's funny to see, successful companies often copy each other. And, two of the largest investments I have, Tesla and Palantir, both did something very, very similar, where Palantir started off with Gotham, which to this day, it's kind of hazy what they did because it's very sensitive government contract deals. But it was lucrative enough to trampoline Foundry into becoming a widely used platform that's being now introduced to startup businesses. Then you look at Tesla. What did they start with? They started up top with very expensive vehicles. Once upon a time, Tesla was a luxury vehicle brand. And then they went top down, and now they're selling the more affordable models. What is Constellation doing? We're starting with the DoD. We're starting with Transcom, an international data provider, and then we'll work top down. The foundation is there with what Constellation is doing, and it's a proven roadmap that has led to extremely lucrative and explosive growth that we're witnessing with two of the most popular stocks on FinTwit and just in the world amongst investors. So I just found, I honestly had goosebumps when I was listening to Cathie Wood talk about Palantir because I was like, this is unintentionally a Constellation video. She just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah, sort of to piggyback off of the Palantir thing, right? Because they clearly saw early on that everything was moving towards this data future. Well, the problem with that is up until Constellation, there was no framework to move all of this data, because the cost of which to move all of this data is probably, you can't even imagine what it would be, because there's I don't even think it's even possible, because there's too many bottlenecks in the system. Perfect example is one of these state channels that's going to be building on the network, Alchemy. So they're making this digital advertising exchange. And they said, if we were to build on the Ethereum network, they would go bankrupt in an hour, because they're going to be handling hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of transactions a second. And when you're talking about the fees associated with the number of transactions that they're going to be running, I mean, there's just no way that that's even possible. And so there are some other networks that have really low fees, but then when think about that. You multiply that out however many times a second, however many times a day, right? Even if it was 10 cents a transaction, you're talking about millions of dollars. Versus $0.
Yeah.
So I always wonder, why haven't payment processors transitioned to the blockchain? And I think one of the big bottlenecks is that, nothing can scale to their level of transactional throughput, and mirror the infrastructure. But Dagnam didn't touch on Alchemy. So I think that's like a pretty good transition into, mentioning talking about the launchpad on top of Constellation, and what companies are they helping, build on top of this entire network. I think Lattice and Alchemy are some two really cool projects that I would love for you guys to talk about, so the listeners can kind of understand, and what problems are these two companies, trying to solve.
Yeah, Lattice is the flagship product of the network, and it's going to be an exchange that's going to provide cross-chain liquidity for not only crypto assets, but just any asset across the board. So you'll be able to just natively swap one asset for another, and up until now, that's never been done before.
And so for the layman, what does that mean? Interoperability between different blockchains. Is there no token that allows you to do that? And then if we can touch on, what do Uniswap do? What does Uniswap do? And what are some other tokens that, do the same thing? I think Cake is another one.
Pancake Swap, yeah, 1 inch, Sushi Swap, all they're just referred to as DEXs, right? And the main difference, and I'll let Digital Dive and Dagnam get into it just because I've used their information to learn. But essentially, at its heart and at its core, what's so different about all of these is every single DEX out there swaps crypto for crypto.
Right.
Lattice is a data for data exchange,
right.
Meaning that the groundwork is being laid to swap crypto for real world utilities, vice versa, or no crypto related swaps, which is the true groundbreaking light bulb moment. So I'll let Dag.
So, did you want to get in there? Yep.
Yeah, I would love to get in there. So I just want to say, I love Lattice. It's got to be one of my favorite parts of the entire, not just the Constellation ecosystem, but honestly all of crypto. What Wyatt has put together is so ahead of what people are even aware of at this time, and what many people are looking for, and probably don't even know it already exists. So Lattice is, to what Pete was saying, it's a DEX. And for those who don't know what a DEX is, it's a decentralized exchange. So most exchanges that people are aware of are things like Coinbase or Binance. Those are centralized exchanges. They have their own unique benefits, but they have their own unique drawbacks. So same thing with DEXs. You have their own unique, a DEX, meaning a decentralized exchange. You have their own unique benefits, but their own unique drawbacks in some cases. So Constellation created their own decentralized exchange called the Lattice Exchange. And one of the amazing things that Lattice Exchange is going to be able to do, now, mind you, if you go to I think it's lattice.exchange. I think that's the correct website URL.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. So you'll see a whole host of different features that are happening on the exchange. But let me tell you one of the major problems in crypto first. One of the major problems is, and it's kind of ironic because it's similar to the DoD, where Ethereum and Bitcoin are their own networks. how do you get Ethereum to communicate with Bitcoin, right? Well, you have to have some form of a bridge. You have to have something that actually makes a connection between the two. Now, this can be very costly in terms of building. It can be a lot of time to build one of these things. So that's called cross-chain atomic swaps. So these cross-chain atomic swaps are very costly. If you want to do them, it's like you don't even want to know how much you'll pay in a fee for something like this, and how to do that. So what Lattice is able to do is able to actually do cross-chain atomic swaps, basically feeless, with like a 95% reduction in fees. So let's say, on average, you were paying anywhere between like $5,000 or $5,000 in a cross-chain atomic swap. You just cut that down by 95%. Now, that's not just the biggest benefit, is that you're reducing fees for something like a cross-chain atomic swap, but you're also actually now able to create a global liquidity pool because of Constellation's technology. You now create a liquidity pool where all of these networks can come, and Constellation can basically envelope them and wrap an entire network. And now you're creating this global liquidity pool where you can transact between different networks, which is something that the crypto space needs, and up until before wasn't possible. So, or at least without paying an astronomical amount of fees. And that's where you may see things like wrapped ETH. For people that see like Ethereum with a W in between, you'll see something like wrapped Ethereum, and that wrapped Ethereum is basically, there was a swap that was made. You wrapped an Ethereum token and you made it able to go on another chain. So like, that's a really oversimplified version of what that is. But essentially now, like with Lattice, yes, you'll be able to actually wrap an entire network and then create this global liquidity pool. Now, that's one benefit of Lattice. You'll also have an automated market maker algorithm there, which kind of removes the idea of an order book on an exchange. You'll also have pro trader tools. You'll be able to mimic the top traders, which is something that's amazing. Let's say I'm one of the best swing traders. All of a sudden, you want to copy my plays. Wow. Go right ahead. More power to you. It'll have an analytics section. It'll have a educational section, and it also has one of the most unique things in the ecosystem is it will also have a launch pad. So the launch pad, which is what you've seen recently with Double Dice. Shout out to Double Dice, where Constellation can give a project access to the launch pad, and then people can, Double Dice gets to go on the launch pad, and then people can
4 million tokens right now.
Right. How much?
4 million.
Yeah. So people will stake their LTX to Double Dice in exchange, and they're now up to $4 million. So the launch pads, any project so far that's gone on the launch pad has been very successful. So to be listed on the launch pad is like a true honor and privilege, because it is truly a launch pad. So that's what Lattice does basically in a nutshell. I'm sure I'm missing out something, but that is what the Lattice exchange is. And it's like a cornerstone of what the Constellation ecosystem. And just kind of to give a little bit of contrast, one of the other major DEXs is Uniswap. It's pretty hard to argue Uniswap's success, to say it's not successful, because it is, right? It is successful, but that doesn't mean it's efficient. So while Uniswap successful and it has lots of listings, and the Uniswap token has done pretty well in terms of market cap, the fees that you pay, I won't even go on Uniswap. You're paying an arm and a leg most of the time in order to get a project. So that fee, all those fees that you're paying on a decentralized exchange like Uniswap because of Ethereum's gas fees, we're removing all of that. So that's another huge benefit to people that want to get involved, period, in crypto, whether you're launching your own token or you're an investor or a token holder. Then guess what? Now you have a feeless decentralized exchange that can wrap other networks and create a global liquidity pool. It's just incredible.
Yeah, yeah, and that's because they're leveraging the power of the hypergraph that's inherently a feeless network. So it's essentially like a wormhole, from one exchange to another exchange. And so that's where the reduced fees come in. Yeah, and there's nobody else that's doing that.
Is it naive for me to think like, how is it not inevitable that Lattice is going to take over Uniswap, Cake, Sushi? It just seems like it's all being set up. So I know a lot of people are conservative and they'll say like, yeah, Uniswap will continue to thrive, Sushi will continue to thrive. There'll always be users. But the end game is, why would anybody stick around if they, if it costs them an arm and a leg to, swap tokens? It seems normal today, but tomorrow, why would there be any reason for anybody to continue to use it?
One thing I'll say is that like traders are super price sensitive, right? Like, and they're very competitive. And if you've got one trader who's paying transaction fees on like Uniswap or wherever, and you've got another one on using Lattice, trading on Lattice, like it's a one-horse race. Like it's just that simple. And to the victor go the spoils. Like it's going to be who moves over the Lattice quick enough, because they're the ones who are going to win.
Right.
Yeah. I think we were talking about this offline. It's like if you're waiting for the network effect to happen,
right.
You're going to miss out on so much potential here that it's almost immeasurable, right? And getting in this early on something that is inevitable, right? Because you're talking about a frictionless system. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, as all these enterprises adopt to some sort of crypto structure, right? Where are they going to go? Are they going to go to some place where they have an upper limit, or they're going to go to some place that's frictionless and has no limit, so they're able to expand as their business grows? They can grow with it. They don't have to worry about it. Yeah. So,
Pete, do you want to get in? And then Brian, I had a question after.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I just had a follow-up question.
Sorry. One final point to mention. Like on Lattice, you are able to put a level of sophistication into your strategies, mm-hmm. which you can't do on other platforms. And you're able to structure trades with more complex logic than you can on other platforms. And that's because of the fact that the hypergraph performs consensus on data itself, right? So it's not just it's actually reaching into the blocks, reaching into the data types and validating aspects of it that are essential for sophisticated trading strategies. And it's sort of hard to explain exactly why that's really important. But basically, when you get these institutional traders coming in, they're going to want to have a sort of a big toolbox for the type of strategies that they deploy. And the only place they can deploy them is Lattice. Like there's no other alternative at the moment.
There's a lot of people who are confused about, all this potential. Why is the market cap sitting only around 250, 270 million? Brian, you mentioned earlier about the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Do you mind, giving the listeners, do you mind explaining that again and helping the listeners understand, like, this is going to be coming in steps? It's not going to all happen at once, but once everybody realizes, hey, this could be better than blockchain potentially, we're going to have to go that direction.
Yeah. So I think that, so I've got a few theories about why it's still so cheap. I think one of the reasons is, first of all, we already are getting massive traction, massive network effect. If you look at the Lattice Launchpad for Q1 2022, 250 companies have signed up for that now. That's a 300% increase from the first batch, which I was part of. So you can see that there is a tide swell of interest there. In terms of the price, I don't really focus too much on price. I think that it is a bit of a distraction. But I think here, if you would try to explain something like why is it seemingly so cheap when it has such extraordinary potential? It's got this deal with the DoD. I think maybe it's because it's quite complex, right? Like this technology is way more complex than most people can grok. And they, rather than really trying to figure it out, most people just sort of dismiss it because they're like, that's too complicated, don't have the time, there's too much going on in the space. And I think that for that reason, a lot of people sort of shoot themselves in the foot and they go off and focus on simpler things. And I think that relatedly, it just takes a long time for the market, people in general, to wrap their head around things. I think people are still just starting to understand like Bitcoin, right? That's now gone mainstream in a big way. Now Ethereum, they're just about starting to grasp Ethereum, I think. But these cycles, like these cognitive cycles required for the general public to understand something, they take time. I think that it's not really the case that everybody eventually understands. What happens is that a few people do the deep research, the deep dives, and then they share that information. They share their conviction about a project with other people. You know, I think Malcolm Gladwell calls them mavens. So like mavens do like this real research, and then other people around them are like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about, I'm going to listen to him. And basically you get a critical mass of mavens, and eventually then that translates into a critical mass of the general public, and then there's sort of a run. Another final thing is just that it's only on one exchange. That is, you know, a lot of people don't, you know, it's a bottleneck for people to get involved in DAG. You know, they have to sign up for KuCoin and figure all that out. And a lot of them are just like, look, I'm not doing that. I'm just going to stick with Coinbase or something.
Right.
So those are three sort of like superficial explanations, but I think they're probably correct in some measure. But I have a lot of other theories as well, which I won't go into though.
Yeah, I think something to note as just like such an accomplishment is, I think it was probably early September when DAG hit like 48 cents, somewhere around there. It reached the top 100, and it was the first and only project to hit the top 100 without being on multiple of the large exchanges and only being on one. Like that's in and of itself incredible. Like the fact that you can't buy DAG on Uniswap and it still hit the top 100 is, think about that. Like think about the accessibility, like hurdles that people have just to buy DAG, and the fact that we still hit the top 100 is like incredible. So for me, you know, there's more nuance to it than just, oh, it's pretty cheap or hasn't reached momentum. In my opinion, it's actually doing extremely well for how, you know, how little exposure it has relative to its peers. And I think, you know, one day we're going to look back and be like, remember when like the biggest bear case against Constellation was that it wasn't just available on Uniswap, and that like deterred people? Like the amount of people that I've tried to show Constellation to, explain to it, and be like, can I buy it on Uniswap? No. Okay, well, and then it's like, that's it. Like those are the NGMIs. They're not going to make it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who, you know, I'm obviously an advocate for DAG, and the amount of people who would be like, oh, where can I get this? And I'm already like, you're not going to get it because if you have to, what's that quote? There's like a crypto quote where it's like, oh, if you have to ask where to buy the crypto, you probably have no business buying the product. Like, because it's all the information's out. You can go on CoinMarketCap and find out where any project is listed, right? So there's already that little level of understanding. But yeah, the amount of times that I know someone has asked me, where can I get this? And I say on KuCoin, and I know that person's going to get to KuCoin and be like, how do I link my card? Or, you know, like they're because it's an exchange, you know, so it's like, it's not as so Coinbase obviously has the most simplified user interface that exists in crypto. KuCoin's just not that. It's a little bit, it's for the more savvy trader.
Right.
So that, I think, to Brian's point, is exactly one of the barriers, because I know many people that have gone there and been like, I can't get it. just because they can't figure out how to use that platform. So that's definitely, and I honestly, Bob, I think you actually nailed every single one. I think I would just end up repeating exactly what you said. I mean, it's so, trying to understand Bitcoin is difficult. Trying to understand Ethereum is more difficult. Trying to understand what Constellation is doing takes a PhD sometimes, and you have to go to school for another year. So it can be quite complex, but I think you're right. People will leave this podcast with everyone here and go, this is a maven, if you will, a group of mavens, I believe now. And so that will create a new ripple effect, if you will, of people that will take an interest in this, hear the opportunity, and do the due diligence and take the time to do the deep dive and the research, do the research to figure out what's actually happening. Because by the time the network effect happens, then let's face it, how early are you at that point? So
yeah, and I think for me, it's a great example of like one of the greatest paradoxes in crypto that I've never been able to quite understand, and I see in stocks all the time. It's like I've heard people look at Constellation, they're like, but bro, it's like only a 300 million market cap, and I'm over here like, it's only 300 million. Like that's a good thing. Like if you understand what you're staring at, that's not a negative. Like that's what it looks like when you stumble upon an incredible opportunity. A market cap should not be anything that sways you one way or the other. It should determine how high your ROI could potentially be. That's all it is. People love to look at market cap and go, oh, it's not in the top 100. Like, great, strap on, go Amazon seatbelts and buy one of those, because that's what's coming. You don't find those life-changing returns on Cardano and Solana and Polkadot. All of them are great projects. Chainlink, they're all great projects, but let's not get it twisted. People enter crypto because of the ceiling of the return you can get is unlike anything. And if you're looking for that, it's outside of the top 100. And there's landmines everywhere out there. So when you find a project with these types of fundamentals and this type of tech going into it and a full ecosystem that's being developed that is just mind-blowing, the more I learn about it, why would it matter what the market cap is? It's a good thing that it's a low market cap, because it's very hard to find a low market cap gem, a true gem.
Also, it's funny. I think people kind of gauge their risk tolerance based on the market caps, right? You're maybe going with a less risky option potentially, but guess what? All of these projects for now go through 50-70% pullbacks. So
yep.
No matter what project you're in. So it doesn't matter. And I also want to say that, in terms of just because something has a high market cap, look at Solana. They had a huge high market cap. What happened to them? They shut down for almost 24 hours. You think that market cap was a measure of safety? It's like, and a lot of times in crypto, there's this unique phenomenon happening, which is people valuing something on nothing more than social consensus. Look at what happened with SHIB. That thing is like, and let me preface this, because the SHIB army is like huge now. No harm to SHIB, but what I'm saying is, from a fundamental standpoint, you can't compare something like SHIB to Constellation or even some of these other chains. So the thing is that in regards to why is the price so low? Well, if it's harder to understand, it makes the valuing on something based on social consensus alone, because you don't have a lot of people that are just looking at it and going, oh, this thing is going to go to the moon like this. Like, it's easy to do that with a meme coin that is just funny, has no real fundamental value, but we're all on the ship and it's like a party we're all going to. Like, that's the power of social consensus. And it's a lot harder to create that like momentum wave when something is much more complex. But in the end, it doesn't matter, because when this thing gets mass adopted, it'll pull something that will make SHIB look like a wave one of an Elliott phase on a macro time frame. It's just going to be.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's unfortunately, because this is so complex, people don't really see the value in it. And that was the whole reason why I came to this whole space in general, because once I saw what Constellation was doing and where they were going with this and the potential, I was like, you know what, everybody and their brother needs to have at least the opportunity to hear about this and make a decision for themselves. And I've heard since I first got in this space the same concerns. But meanwhile, just in Constellation alone, I've already over 40x'd my investment, right? And that's amazing. But we are still early. And so what is that guy going to wait for? The next 40x, the next 100x, before the network effect happens, and then they're going to buy in? I mean, yeah, but this is great that you're providing this opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we sort of saw like these investments come in phases. So the original cryptocurrencies we saw, like, Bitcoin took off, Ethereum took off, and then eventually NFTs took off. Now we're sort of seeing like the beginning, early infancy days of nodes. And so for people who are watching this video and think, okay, this seems sort of, at the point where maybe I won't be able to afford this a year from now, why not give it a try? Why not invest? What would you say to people who are investing, and how would you explain, the opportunity to own a node? What is the importance of, operating a node, owning a node, which actually, I believe that you need to own 250,000 DAG tokens. What do you think is the upside of somebody who's listening to this and is actually, contemplating purchasing a full node?
I've a comment. So what's your favorite crypto? Set up a state channel for that crypto. Set up a liquidity pool in the Hypergraph and earn it using DAG. Right? DAG is the meta token. You can use it to acquire any other token in the space. And you will be running the cheapest liquidity pool going, like it will be the most attractive for people looking for liquidity. So that's sort of letting the cat out of the bag here. Like when you buy DAG, it gives you options to earn passive revenue of any sort, whatever tokens you like in the future.
Could you explain the passive revenue? I don't think a lot of people understand, why are you getting paid? Why are you getting rewarded for operating a node?
Yeah, so basically when you operate a node, you're securing the network, you're validating data pipelines, and that basically is a valuable service that people are willing to pay for. So you get node rewards, and I think they're currently, I can't remember the exact numbers. I think for soft nodes now, we're expecting a couple thousand DAG per month. And these are node rewards that have been sort of set aside and will be paid out over the next few decades, I think. And you can point your node at whatever you like. So you have, the option of securing a data pipeline for the Air Force. You could be using it, pointing it at Lattice and earning Lattice. So there's a lot of optionality, and you can earn other tokens depending upon what you're pointing your node at. So it solves the problem of merged mining, which is this old problem in blockchain. And I just think, for me, that's fascinating, because it's like, okay, well, maybe I set up a Shiba Inu liquidity pool. Everybody loves Shiba, cool, great. I love DAG. Sounds a bit like dog, but it's not, it's different. And I'm going to set this up and earn whatever the popular token of the day is. I'm like, it's future proof in that way, right? Like, because I'm sure there's going to be about 10 other doggy tokens, right, that are really popular and go into the trillion market caps, right? That's fine. But I will have the ability to earn all of those using DAG. And that is not something you can say about any other network. Right. It makes it such a unique value proposition.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hit on the tokenomics. So I know another really popular node that people are buying today is Strong. But the worry with Strong is that people worry that the lake is going to run dry. So it costs, I believe it costs about 10 Strong to operate a node. And so for every node that you build on top of that, you're exponentially able to buy more nodes. And at what point does this, river of money flowing into your account run dry if everybody is doing the same thing as you? So do you feel confident about DAG's tokenization or the tokenomics? And do you feel confident that, it's not necessarily going to be called a Ponzi the same way that people, refer to Strong's tokenomics?
So each state channel is its own unique reward pool, and that's what's different, right? So you can, Lattice is a state channel. So putting my node into the Lattice state channel, I'll be rewarded with Lattice. And the Lattice rewards will be based upon all the little fees that go on from the swapping, because there still is a small fee associated with that, because you can't get rid of the fees that are associated with Ethereum, right? But you're talking about an 80% reduction in fees. And so to help with the transaction, I'll point my DAG node to the Lattice exchange, and then in return, I will be rewarded in Lattice. Or like Alchemy, I can point my node to the Alchemy state channel and get rewarded in ads token. So each state channel is its own reward pool.
I love that. I love the idea that Lattice is whatever you want it to be when you get paid in it. I love that.
And for me, the tokenomics is my favorite thing to talk about with people that are getting into the project, because, I am not like Dagnam, where I was lucky enough to see Constellation as my first project. I mean, I was very obsessive about going through all the meme coins, the Sheebs, the Hawks, all of them. There's Dinger now. It's Elon Musk's scat. I don't want to get into it. But then there's also the Cardanos and the Solanas. There's such a wide range of blockchains and crypto projects, and they're all based on, I think it was Matteo used this term, but it was narrative economics. And when I really started thinking about this concept, it's what really made the light bulb go off, which is that, Charles Hoskinson on one of his YouTube lives was talking about, if I understood what Cardano's price did and why it did it, I wouldn't be where I'm sitting. And to me, that was such a, wait, what? This guy created Cardano, which is a brilliant project, and he doesn't understand what makes the price go up and down. So why is Constellation different? Well, it's based on generative economics, which quite simply is the action coming in and off the network is a direct reflection of the price of the token. And it's as simple as that. And, if it was a speculative asset, okay, maybe there would be risk. But we just have spent now an hour and a half talking about what is coming down the pipeline of this tech company and what's going to be coming onto the network. There's no questioning the price action. There's no wondering, hey, is this going to just dump on us? You can't dump something that the DoD is using to process their data. You can't dump something that Lattice is working on top of, because it's not up to us. Right now, something that a lot of people have lost sight of with Constellation being only on KuCoin is you are battling the KuCoin trading bots right now. That's literally what's happening. That's why the things go up and down. And that's why this trading patterns are so clean, is because they disproportionately affect the KuCoin price or the DAG price, because it's mostly the KuCoin trading bots, because it's only on KuCoin. When the mainnet launches and the generative tokenomics kick in, you're not going to notice that. That's going to be a nothing. That's going to be at the very bottom, because it's going to be a very small slice of the price action, and it's not going to be up to us anymore. And I think people really lose sight of what's happening now is not what you're investing in when mainnet launches. And I think it's just really important to understand the distinction between the generative tokenomics and what everyone else is doing, because once you really realize that generative tokenomics is a stroke of genius when it comes to what's fair and what is an honest price action looks like, you really start to question why other projects aren't built on top of a similar, tokenomics model.
Eric, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I want to touch on something that I want everyone to be really clear on, and that I hope we don't breeze over it, which was, you brought up Strong and the idea of a Ponzi, right? Being a Ponzi scheme. And this is not, listen, if you're I know people running many Strong nodes. So I'm not bashing Strong. Hey, if you're making money, good on you, good for you. But the thing that makes me nervous about something like Strong is like, okay, you're all just basically participating in this, like, literally just a node structure where you're just all in it to get rewards, right? Eventually, that is not built on what is it securing? What's the utility of it? Like, because there's going to come a time, and it will happen eventually. And it may happen when Bitcoin goes down. It may happen at some time where there will be one big, strong person to take all of their profits. And someone will notice a change in the price action. And when that thing tips 10%, it'll tip 20%, it'll tip 50%, it'll go to 70%, 80%. And that's because there's no actual value that model is securing beyond a bunch of people just trying to earn passive income. And when people feel that is then being threatened, they will pull out completely, because there's nothing that it's actually securing or valuating beyond just it is a speculative asset. What's the speculation? Well, if I run one of these nodes, I can make passive income. And the speculation is that's just going to keep going on indefinitely. And that river can run dry. And people will be scared when that price drops. And that is what will create a mass amount of volatility of people that will eventually fail. That's my thought. Now, if someone disagrees with me, completely understand. More power to it.
You're exactly right. Because there's no utility in that, and that's the major difference. So these state channels are essentially businesses, right? So Alchemy isn't going to all of a sudden just shut down and stop doing business, right? They're going to need to stay open 24/7, 365, right? Same thing with the Department of Defense, right? They are not going to shut down and sell their tokens, because that's not what it's about. It's about maintaining the network, making sure that you always have a stable transactions, right? And that's going to be participating in the network. And so this is where all the nodes come in. And so to incentivize you to get your node onto whatever state channel, it's going to be very competitive, right? So me as a DAG holder with my node, I can look at these two different state channels and say, oh, well, this guy is offering me X, but I can go over here for Y, and for whatever reason, maybe I want Alchemy more than I want Lattice.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's so funny how quickly people's arguments fall apart, because we were just touching on one of the big arguments people touch on is, what's the market cap of DAG? Why is it so low? Okay, 250 million, great. Strong is currently at 150 million market cap. Where is the hesitancy in that? Where are you worried about the market cap with that? And not only that, I've seen a lot of people, say something along the lines of, this isn't my first cycle. I know how this goes. I'm going to go into Strong. That is the biggest irony, because if you have been through a cycle before, I didn't do great. I'm not over here saying I murdered it in the last cycle. I didn't, but I learned. And what I learned is that what is happening right now is Strong, and every crypto coming after it looks identical. There's hopium, and then a massive iceberg tipping point, and everyone gets dumped on. And it is not a clean exit. It is a confidence shattering, I'm never going back into crypto again, tipping point. And you're just jaded for the next 10 years. And the next bull cycle, you're looking at it like, I've been scammed before, I'm not falling for it again. So I just say, touching on what Mr. Digital Dive said, be very careful with projects like Strong.
Right.
Yeah.
And guys, before we run too long, I just want to hit on some points, as we get to the end. I think there were a couple of things that we didn't actually hit on. It was something I wanted to ask Brian. So we're discussing the nodes right now. Me and Pete and I we were speaking this week, and Pete, I actually asked you, I said, is there a lockup period? And Pete responded to me, no, there's no lockup period. And then I responded to him, so is that good or is that bad? And Pete basically explained it. He said, that's Constellation basically telling us, hey, whether you choose to have a node or not, we're going to be totally fine without you. So anybody want to touch on that topic? The fact that they don't have to opt in there's no lock-in period where you have to keep your node on the network for a certain amount of days. What's the benefit of that? And then what is that really, what is that showing us in terms of their network?
Well, I suppose the requirement that you have 250,000 DAG in a node is a lockup in a sense, because you need that minimum amount in order to, participate as a node and to get that passive revenue. So it's not an explicit lockup, but I agree with Pete with your take, which is just like, look, this is market economics, right? Free market economics, and it's up to you how you choose to deploy your capital, or if you choose to sell it. I think it is a vote of confidence, like from the team, to allow people to just make the decision themselves, sort of saying like, look, we know the value of this network. We know that the market is going to recognize this value. So why would we stop people from selling their tokens if they want to? There's going to be plenty of willing hands. They're going to scoop those up real quick. I'll buy them.
I'll buy them.
So I think that, this sort of relates to the whole idea of token velocity, which is this idea about how frequently tokens change hands. And some token models have a model where they're used for payments, which means that they tend to change hands more often. And that means that they don't accrue value as quickly. So a slower token accrues value more quickly. And in the case of DAG, you do have these, what they call token sinks in the form of the nodes, because you need to put 250,000 down for a node, which means that you're holding on to that while you're running the node and you're earning passive revenue. But because you're staking it, it's slower. It's lower token velocity. I think that it makes sense. I think it would be strange to require people to lock them up.
Also, what I want to touch on too, and this is what, if you want to know what I think when I envision what the lockup is for nodes, it's this. If you want to run your business and your state channel, the lockup is that you need to run nodes. So the lockup isn't a lockup that was decided by Constellation that said, hey, for 14 or 30 or a year, which I've seen in some cases, you have to lock up X amount of DAG to run a node. It's, hey, if you want to participate, in order to participate, you have to have these minimum requirements to run a state channel. And that is the lockup. Now, if I then didn't want to run my business anymore, I, as a free market individual running a business, can close down shop if I want. And I can either then hang on to those allocations of 250,000 DAG, which is a node's worth, or I can sell them if I wanted to, or I can take that 250,000 DAG. If I didn't want to sell and I wanted to hold on to it, but I still wanted rewards, I can either leave it as a network node and receive DAG, or I can point it to another state channel such as Alchemy and earn ads tokens. And that just speaks to the economy that the hypergraph is, because I don't have to, it's not useless if I don't want to run my state channel anymore. Like, that DAG could then be used in various other ways. You have options. But again, the stake up to me is really just the fact that, think about it, over 250 project submissions. That's a lot of DAG being staked, because every single one of those people to run a state channel have to stake nodes. So, or stake or run nodes. So think about it like this. There's a support level in the price of DAG that is purely built on the business running on the network. So, because at a certain point, you think Alchemy, when the price drops, they're going to sell their nodes? No, they're going to run their state channel. And that's going to happen for tens, hundreds of businesses that are going to stake DAG. It's going to, and Brian was correctly, absolutely correct with the token velocity. That DAG will not be exchanged. It will be locked away for years, for as long as these businesses are operating, which is, as a DAG token holder, for me, something that I see as an absolute benefit, while also not trying to pigeonhole people into staking an asset that maybe they want more freedom over.
Yeah, and so once
yep.
that lockup happens and mainnet goes live, you want to talk about velocity. Things are going to happen real quick, real fast. And I can tell you, between me and just a handful of people that I work with, we have well over the 200 nodes worth of DAG. So things I think are going to get pretty interesting pretty quick once that staking starts, and that DAG is sort of locked up.
Yeah.
Pete, I have a question before we finish up. Before we conclude the podcast, I want to discuss a little bit about supply and demand. So there's a finite amount of DAG. And so for every node, a node has to purchase at least 250,000 DAG tokens. Every business that wants to run on the Constellation network has to purchase a node as well, essentially, right? And so now we're talking about is that not how it works?
No, you can run a state channel without a node, and then the network, the community would put nodes on there, like you would use the community nodes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's safe to say that there will be DAG going out of circulation.
When you mean out of circulation, you mean like a change in the tokenomics, or there will be
change in supply and demand and pricing of the token itself?
Oh, well, obviously, right, the token's going to change because price alone is driven by supply and demand. There's, like that is the essence of price action. So it's like what you're going to see is this. A lot of DAG is going to be locked up, if you will, in these state channel businesses. You will have people that will be running nodes that will be either just network validators and receiving DAG as rewards, or a new exciting project that comes out. And let's say I'm a business and I say, hey, I want to announce my business today. I can let the community know, and they can say, oh, I want to support this business because it seems really like a great opportunity for me, and I can move my nodes if I wanted to that state channel. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think is one of the things that people don't see. But there's also different types of nodes, and I don't want to get into it too much right now because, one, I think there's maybe not enough time to cover all this, and I don't want to leave people open-ended on a rabbit hole. But you have hybrid nodes, you have network validator nodes. You can stake DAG for bandwidth on the network, which is another way to get access to the network. So Dagnam's absolutely correct. So there's different ways to actually gain the utility of the network.
And there will be light nodes as well, where you'll be able to stake less than 250,000 DAG. So there will be plenty of opportunities for anybody that wants to participate in the network.
And light nodes will be able to run full consensus.
Okay.
And that number is, I've heard floated around different times. And it's probably not because people are going to ask how much is a light node?
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I've heard multiple variations of what the number could be. I don't think it's worth mentioning at this time because I don't want to give people an incorrect answer.
For you saying for nodes or light nodes also as well?
Light nodes.
Light nodes. Because I think a lot of people who are listening are probably curious. Okay, yeah, I could get passive income, but how much passive income am I getting? Is this worthy of my time? So is there any math that we can do, to sort of calculate, okay, what
I think Alchemy on their white paper, they talked about 25% APY. But then, like I was saying, that it's going to be a very competitive marketplace, right? Because if you want increased throughput, you need the nodes, right? So if Alchemy is offering 25% APY, but you want their nodes, you just say, hey, look, I'm offering 45%, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a very competitive marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think Nat, I think you and I went through the math at one point, but there is like a node paper on the Constellation website. There's like the reason why this is so difficult to answer, and people love to feel like secure in their investment, even though they're in crypto, which is like ironic. But essentially the way it's going to work is there's going to be a consistent snapshot, which is going to lead to payouts, which is going to be contingent on the price of the DAG, how many nodes are on the network. Right. Now, that also is contingent on the amount of data and action coming in and off of the network. So when you ask, what are you going to be getting from a node? There's so many moving pieces. And I don't think even the most savvy, the Dagnams, the Mr. Digital Dive, the Bobs of the world even could tell you like what the ceiling of this is going to look like, what the price action when mainnet goes live is going to look like, because that's going to be the price of DAG. That's what's going to be paid out. And that's going to be determined on how much action is coming. It's circular, right? So all you have to know is there's going to be snapshots, it's going to be payouts, and it's going to be divvied up amongst the nodes. And from there, it's your guess is as good as mine to know what that price action is going to look like and what's going to be live on the mainnet. But it's not going to be like a casual, like, ooh, I think we're going up. It's like you flip the switch. Go look at the Mana price action from today. I think you bought the top on that. That's Mana, dude. Half of that was because people thought it was Facebook. Like that's just what could happen when people think something is going to happen. When mainnet goes live, that thing is going so parabolic, it's going to be silly. You're not going to be worried about a number.
Yeah, and I want to say this about the nodes too, is that node rewards also will be based off of if you're running consensus based off your pro score. So it's a further incentivization for someone to have good upkeep on their nodes. And that's one of the ways that we incentivize people to maintain the health of the network. So if you have a higher pro score, you're being chosen to run consensus more and you get more rewards. So it's like no free lunch. Like if you're participating, you're adding resources to the network and you're keeping the network healthy, you're incentivized to do that further. Now, with that being said, it's really hard to factor when mainnet goes live what node rewards are actually going to be, because there's so many variables. Are you just a network validator? Are you a hybrid node? Are you running a node for a state channel? What's your pro score? But what we do know is that with all these businesses going live and the generative economics token model of DAG, it's going to be very exciting. It's going to be very exciting. Now, soft node staking will have its own fixed APY, and you'll hear more about that soon. What's today? Yeah, you'll hear more about that very soon. That's a different thing than what it's going to be like to run consensus on mainnet 2.0 with the proof of reputable observation score.
Yeah, soft nodes aren't actual nodes. It's just a staking mechanism right? That's tied to the reward pool that's already set aside for the network validator nodes that are currently earning a reward pool. So the soft nodes will get a fixed portion of those rewards, and the rewards will be based off of how many people actually stake, right? So if only 200 people stake, right, you're going to get a lot of rewards versus if like 2,000 people stake, because that's splitting up the rewards between all those people with the soft nodes.
And yeah,
go ahead,
Eric, you want any last thoughts?
There was one thing that I wish everyone knew about DAG, and if we didn't talk about this, I hope we mention it, is that one, I really, really hope that you look into the generative economics model of the token. It's one thing to have, when you want to talk about speculation, DAG is not like every other cryptocurrency. It is actually a reformulation of what a cryptocurrency is. DAG is an index token. If you like, everyone's excited about nodes. Everyone's excited about, the ability to earn passive income. The most advanced thing I have seen come out of this entire space is the DAG generative economics token model. It is not a speculative asset. When mainnet 2.0 is live, it will work the DAG token to index and underwrite the value of all the economic activity happening on the network, similar to how the NASDAQ is a score of all the businesses that are making up this NASDAQ composite total, right? So now imagine if there was a cryptocurrency that was indexing the value of all the economic activity happening on the ecosystem, and you combine that with 100, 200, or 300 projects that are coming in with their own potential and their own market caps into the ecosystem. And before anyone gets really confused, it's not like a one-to-one. It's not like for $1 that it increases the DAG market cap by $1. There's a whole bunch of generative calculus math that is way above my pay grade, so I can't explain that very well, the actual math behind it. But I will say that the thing that excites me the most, and that if you're interested in learning more about DAG, learn about its generative economics token model and find out why it's not a speculative asset and why it's an index token and what that means in terms of network effect. If you look into that, you will quickly realize that this is extremely exciting. And while running a node and being able to earn passive income is amazing, but as a DAG token holder for a asset that's not speculative with a massively growing ecosystem, that to me is the most exciting thing in the space.
That's a really good point. I'm actually going to be attaching the white paper below when I upload this to YouTube. So anybody who's interested in reading, the white paper and how the whole ecosystem works, I think I'm going to try and provide, every resource possible for anybody who's really, really trying to go down the rabbit hole. And guys, I actually have to run in a few minutes, but if everybody wants to give like some concluding remarks, I think that would be awesome.
I think I just gave mine.
Yeah, I want to just give a standing ovation after that. No, just to touch on what Eric just said. Genuinely, the generative economics is what sold me on selling pretty much everything else I have in my crypto portfolio, because it just made everything else, it dwarfed everything else, especially when you then take a step back and realize you're coupling this with a DoD contract, you're coupling this with 250, take a step back, understand the ecosystem, understand the businesses that are coming onto the ecosystem itself, and then think back to what the generative economics token model means. And it should be a light bulb, mind blown moment. And my final statement is, whatever Bob has coming, I'm pointing my note at that.
Yeah. Cryptographically secure network that's interoperable with any system that can validate any data in real time. That's the big takeaway that people should really try to wrap their brains around. And like Eric was saying, you definitely want to understand the generative economics. And so I encourage everybody to not only read the white paper, but read the tokenomics paper. And Brian has one of the best videos explaining both the technical aspects of the white paper and the tokenomics. And so I encourage everybody to read both of those papers, but also watch his video.
Right. They are
Thanks, Dagnam. Thank you. Thanks very much, guys. I just concur with what everyone else has said. I think the generative economics is something really, really special. The idea of it being an index token really captures that. This is not a zero-sum economy. This is a positive sum economy. When companies come and join the Hypergraph, you as a DAG holder are rewarded for their success. It is not at your expense. They are increasing the value of your holdings. This is even if you're not pointing a node at their state channel. It is just by virtue of being a DAG holder, your DAG is increasing in value because DAG is functionally required by them for their project. It means that the value of DAG is increasing. So it's a very interesting sort of egalitarian and open economy. And like everyone else has said, it's really worth diving in there. It's unlike anything else in the whole crypto space. And I think that it really does have the potential to change the world.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I did learn a lot. I'm still going down the rabbit hole with this. I still have a lot to learn. Like, this is probably, Pete says, we literally talk every day. Pete says like he applauds me because he says this is probably the most complex project in cryptocurrency, in DeFi. And it definitely does take a lot of time and effort, to go down into the rabbit hole and try and, wrap your head around this. It's not something that you can do an all-nighter and sort of come out the next morning and understand. There's no way. You have to be asking questions. You have to know what type of questions to be asking. And sometimes I even feel stupid asking questions. Like I'll ask Pete something in a DM and I don't know if it's even going to make sense or not, or but there's people who are willing to answer the questions for you. And I think that's what's so good about the community. Like the people are super sweet. You guys have been so open about answering all my questions. And I only joined a week ago and sort of just feels like a family where everybody is so welcoming and like wants you to learn and wants you to ask the right questions and so willing to give you the answers that you're looking for. So I really want to thank you guys for that. Like you guys have been so awesome, even though I've only known you for the past week.
Thanks, Nat. Appreciate you having us on here. And for taking the time and having the curiosity and reaching out and asking the questions. It says a lot about you, and I just want to say again, thanks for having us on.
Awesome, thank you guys.
Thanks. Yeah.
Y'all on level 1, I'm level 3. Pounding on the table for my team. Every night I flex, I'm making big moves. That's a